What is the connection between a tornado siren and a driveway? I'll tell you what that is in this episode of X-Town. All right, guys, welcome to the official first episode of X-Town. This is the rebranding of the Xenia Word on Street podcast. I'm your host, Josh Long, and how fitting it is to have our first episode of X-Town during the first week in April, because that first week in April is an important milestone, an important time in our community's past that has shaped for generations that have come since. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, maybe you live under a rock in our community, or maybe you're not even from Xenia and you're listening to X-Town, the podcast about Xenia, Ohio, and I appreciate you being here. Just in case you don't know what I'm talking about, on April 3rd, 1974, an F5 tornado tore through Xenia, Ohio, killing 33 people, injuring another 1,400. It left a path of damage of half a mile wide, destroying 1,400 buildings, including 1,200 homes, at least 10 churches, half the schools, I think. It is estimated at the time that the storm damage cost the community $100 million. April 3rd, 1974 was a day that defined our town and the lives of many in it. The years of rebuilding, both physically and emotionally, have taken their toll. I did not want to release this podcast on April 3rd because I believe that day is reserved for the sharing of memories and stories from those who lived through that tragic event. They have a role, maybe an obligation in our community's history to be the keeper of those memories, to share it on Facebook, share it with their kids. Part of that storytelling, though, has not only shaped their generation, it's had a large impact on the generation that have come since. See, here's the thing. I was born after that day. In fact, I was born more than 5 years after the tornado. I have kids who were born more than 30 years after that tornado. My life and theirs, though, were still extremely impacted by the events that happened over 30 years prior to their birth. I spent this week on social media, on our phone line at xeniaword.com, talking with friends and neighbors about the storm and its impact on them and the generation. See, if you really think about this, and I actually spoke to one family who's now had 4 generations of birth since that tornado. My family's had 2 or 3, others 3. But every generation that has come since that day in 1974 has been impacted by that day in 1974. And we're going to talk about that in some detail here. What's allowed me to do is take some personal reflection on how that storm has impacted my life even now, 43 years after that day. As I said, I was born 5 years after the tornado, so the storm itself has no memory in my brain. When I look at our community, I don't see a physical scar. I don't see a building that wasn't rebuilt. I do see some plots of land that was told had something else on it. I don't know life before Xenia Town Square, for those a little more mature than me. Downtown has not been a strong influence in my upbringing. I don't even think if I close my eyes, I can recall ever seeing a train or hearing a train coming through our community. And I'm nearly 40 years old. So when I thought about this and how the storm has impacted me, it's impacted me a few ways, but what kind of emotion it stirs up in me. The first is anger. I'm mad at Mother Nature for robbing me of being able to experience Xenia, Ohio before that storm. What it must have been like to live downtown or see the downtown buildings, multiple story, 5, 6, 7-story buildings downtown. To see the train come down the middle of Detroit Avenue before bicycles. I don't have those memories, and I feel robbed from that point in time in history. I'm also a little apathetic to see that I believe for some, not a lot, but for many, that tornado put a line in the sand for every life experience after that tornado has been measured against life before that tornado. I have an analogy I share sometimes that Some in our community used that time, their childhood before the tornado, as a ball and chain around their ankle, stopping them from enjoying what we currently have and taking part in the future of Xenia. That's not everybody. I have very good friends who look back on that day, as tragic as it is, with memories of not only the storm, but how a community had come together, supported each other, rebuilt homes, rebuilt businesses, rebuilt a downtown to a large degree. So I wanted to explore the impact of the storm on the generations that had come since. I wanted to play with this idea in my head that for one storm, how it impacted multiple generations. And I understand that all too well that Xenia has had multiple tornadoes since that day, even the one in 2000 that had a large effect on my family and our homes. But I'm just going to talk about the impact of tornadoes from a viewpoint of 1974 and the future after that day. So what I mean by that is, think about this. So, like I said, families have had 2 and 3 generations since that tornado. I met, again, that one family's had 4 generations born ever since. I got to speak with a woman who was holding her 3-day-old, and he marked that 4th generation since that tornado. In my family, again, we've had 2 generations since. And after talking with everybody and enjoying the social media posts, it really boiled down to 3 areas. These are 3 themes that really resonated through stories I've heard. I wish I could have gotten 1 or 2 to agree to come and get on the podcast, but many love to share their stories, did not want to get on the microphone. Not even my own daughter, who I'll share a story here in a moment about. The first area that the storm has had an impact on multiple generations, those that come since that tornado. One is on how we perceive storms. I asked my 10-year-old daughter if she's ever seen a tornado, and of course her answer was no. I asked her if she had ever heard a tornado, and she said no. I asked her then why she was scared of a tornado, and she said because it will destroy our home. She knows this, because of television, but she feels this. She attaches emotion to it because of the stories of myself, my parents, and those who speak about the tornado's impact on their life. And I think that's probably going to be a reality, maybe even 5 generations, 6 generations. I'm sure time will heal that wound. But again, 2, 3 generations past that tornado, that event in 1974 is still shaping the emotions that a 10-year-old attaches to a storm that she has no idea what it was. She has no idea really how much damage it caused. She's only seen pictures and heard stories. And she's formed very strong emotional feelings off of that. In fact, the other day when the tornado sirens went off in Xenia for a storm that had since gone past the storm, she was petrified. She jumped up. She was scared. But because we're from Xenia, how we perceived the storm, she knew the plan. She knew the action. She knew what steps she had to take when that siren goes off, when you hear the word tornado. She knew to find her parents. She knew that she's supposed to go to that interior room in her home. So I can't say that how we perceive storms or how the tornado has impacted how we perceive storms is necessarily a bad thing. Of course, it breeds fear, the fear of a tornado, but it also bred reaction, plans, preparation on how to deal with that what-if scenario. So the second way that the storm has shaped the opinions of generations since the tornado is on our government. This one actually kind of surprised me a little bit. See, I've spent some time in city government, and I know firsthand that no one sitting on city council was an authority at the time of the 74 tornado. Some have memories of the tornado, but they weren't an authority figure to make decisions. And I know for the fact that the city manager wasn't even probably alive then, has no connection. In fact, I sat on city council for many years, and the tornado is just something that gets mentioned as a memory. It's not something that's used to shape or define policy moving forward. It's lessons learned, though. Lessons learned like Xenia Town Square and not repeating some of those mistakes. But we only know that those mistakes are mistakes. For example, we only know that Xenia Town Square in many opinions, is a mistake in Xenia's history. We only know that because of hindsight. There's no way a city council member at the time, city commission member or a county commission member would know that that wasn't a good decision. I do not ridicule, I do not shape my opinion of the authority figures of that day based off their decisions using the benefit of hindsight. I try to put myself in their shoes, that they woke up that morning on April 3rd, went to their day job. They were a volunteer commission member. They went to bed that night, though, as a leader in their community, forced with hard decisions on how to recover and rebuild. Couldn't imagine that stress that placed upon them. Those people who had to step up, work tirelessly night and day to rebuild our community. When they ran for election prior to 1974, they had no clue that running on a platform of storm recovery probably would have been beneficial to their job. Nevertheless, as I said, I spoke to young men who were born after the tornado. A friend of mine, Matt, shared a story, some comments that, it shaped his opinion, his trust in government, because he's heard the story from his parents about land being bought by FEMA. Some even would say land stole. I wasn't alive then. I don't know what happened, but it's perceived, it's given us perception, some of us, negative perceptions of city government, even those that were not alive then. The largest theme that I've seen, though, through everyone I spoke with, just about everyone, is this perception of the future. There are some in our community that this tornado is a ball and chain, especially those, I've kind of, and this would be a bit of a stereotype, it's not everybody, but that generation of young men and women who grew up as a middle schooler or a high schooler after the 74 tornado, late 70s, they grew up in a community that 70% of it was devastated. They didn't have, many went to school at night right after the tornado. They didn't have any entertainment. They didn't have these things. They didn't even have restaurants that, to a large degree. Some stories showed that they went to bed the night before making plans to go down to the root beer stand on the weekend just to wake up to the root beer stand not being there. Something to think about. They had this perceived future, and that's kind of where I'm at. I asked myself when I'm recording this podcast, is what's my point with this? What do I want to take away from this? And I take away some passion. I take away some optimism in our community. See, I'm proud of that point in Xenia's history, the obstacles and the success. Mother Nature gave us a huge blow. Generations have been impacted. But a community that literally has rebuilt from the worst the weather can throw at us has everything to gain, because everything else, every other challenge, potholes in the roads, parks, schools, even poverty, even the heroin epidemic taking over our community, everything else can be overcome. I know this because Xenia has overcome something larger. It just takes the right amount of time, the right amount of passion, determination, and a whole lot of volunteers. I almost forgot. So what does tornado sirens and driveways have in common? Or how are they connected? So if Milkshake brings all the boys to the yard, tornado sirens bring all the dads to the driveway. And if you grew up in Lanewood or Arrowhead, almost any subdivision in Xenia, Ohio, you know what I mean. Tornado sirens go off, dads go to the driveway. You can look down the street like Colorado Drive, where I live right here, and you'll see grown men staring at the sky. I don't know what they expect to see or expect to do if they see that tornado coming. But as kids, we were always sent to the bathroom, and dads went to the street to see if they could see those storms. My dad did it. Hell, I even do it. All right, X-Town. Out of here. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the podcast. And just a reminder to visit xeniaword.com to get the latest news, events, and views from our community. Here at Xenia's Word on the Street, we are for our community, by our community. Please like and share us on Facebook, too. I am out of here. Hey, what is this?
Xenia's word on the street.